The smell of smoke still clung to Abigail Johnson's clothes as she stood across the street, watching firefighters battle the inferno consuming her home. Her husband, Benjamin Causey, stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders in what should have been a comforting embrace. But Abigail felt the tension in his grip, saw the way his eyes tracked the flames with an intensity that had nothing to do with loss and everything to do with calculation. "Everything we built," Benjamin said, his voice appropriately broken. "Gone, just like that." But Abigail had seen something 20 minutes earlier, something Benjamin didn't know she'd witnessed. She'd seen him in the garage through the window, not packing their belongings as he'd claimed, but pouring something from a red container along the walls. She'd seen him check his watch with the cold precision of a man executing a plan. She'd seen the determination on his face, and in that instant, she had understood everything. Her husband of 7 years was burning down their house for the insurance money, and he thought she was too blind to notice. The realization hit her like ice water. The recent $500,000 insurance policy, his stress about money since his layoff 3 months ago, the distance between them that had grown into a chasm. It all crystallized in that moment through the garage window. Benjamin wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. Abigail's mind flashed to 3 hours earlier. Benjamin suggesting dinner to celebrate her promotion at the architecture firm where she worked. Her, 35, and finally achieving the career success she'd dreamed of, touched by his gesture. Him, 49 and recently unemployed, suddenly playing the attentive husband after months of cold shoulders and resentment. "You go ahead and get ready," he'd said. "I'll load some boxes into the storage unit." She'd gone upstairs to shower, but when she realized she'd forgotten her phone in the garage, she'd gone back down. That's when she'd seen him, her husband, the man she'd supported through to failed businesses and countless investment opportunities, methodically preparing to destroy everything they owned. For half a second, Abigail had frozen. Confrontation meant danger. Benjamin was 6 feet 2 inches with a temper that had been getting worse since his layoff. She'd seen him punch holes in walls, watched him throw furniture, felt the implicit threat in his size when they argued. If she confronted him now, with accelerant and matches and desperation now, she needed to survive first. Plain second, Abigail had slipped back upstairs, her mind racing faster than her heart. She grabbed her laptop, her important documents, the external hard drive containing 7 years of financial records she'd meticulously kept despite Benjamin's insistence that she didn't need to worry about the boring stuff. She'd hidden them in her car, then returned to the house, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. When the fire started 20 minutes later, Abigail had been in the shower. Benjamin had heroically pulled her out, both of them barely escaping with their lives. The neighbors had called 911, and now they stood watching their home burn, supposedly devastated. But Abigail wasn't devastated. She was furious. And she was already planning her revenge. She let a tear slide down her cheek, not for the house burning, but for the woman she'd been an hour ago. The woman who'd trusted Benjamin. The woman who'd believed his lies about loving her. That woman was gone, consumed by flames just like the 5-bedroom colonial behind her. "We'll rebuild," Benjamin murmured, squeezing her shoulder. "The insurance will cover everything." Abigail nodded, playing her role perfectly. "Yes," she whispered, "we will." But silently, she made a different promise. Benjamin had made a fatal mistake thinking she would be an easy victim. He was about to learn that some fires don't destroy, they forge something stronger. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone in power? I hope this story reminds you that patience and strategy can defeat even the most arrogant opponent. Now let's get back to our story. The fire inspector arrived at 9 a.m. the next morning, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the blackened ruins that had been Abigail's home. Marcus Webb was a black man in his 50s with the kind of presence that made people sit up straighter. Former military. Abigail guessed, from the way he carried himself. "Mrs. Causey," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Inspector Webb. I'm sorry for your loss." "It's Ms. Johnson," Abigail corrected gently, shaking his hand. "I kept my name. And thank you. I'll help however I can." They stood at the edge of the property while Webb asked his questions, and Abigail answered each one with careful precision. Yes, they'd been planning to go to dinner. Yes, Benjamin had been in the garage beforehand loading boxes, he'd said. Yes, they'd recently increased their insurance policy. Yes, her husband had been stressed about money since his layoff 3 months ago. She watched Webb's eyes sharpen with each answer. Saw him making connections she was deliberately laying out like breadcrumbs. Miss Johnson, Webb finally said, his voice dropping lower, I'm going to be honest with you. This fire has all the hallmarks of arson. We found traces of accelerant in 3 different locations: the garage, the living room, and the master bedroom. This wasn't an accident. Abigail let her face crumble just enough. What are you saying? I'm saying someone deliberately set this fire. Webb's gaze was steady, assessing. And in my experience, when a house burns down 6 months after a major insurance policy increase, we look very carefully at the homeowners. Benjamin was brought in for questioning that afternoon. Abigail stood in the observation room, watching through the one-way mirror as her husband performed his role with Academy Award-worthy precision. This is ridiculous, Benjamin said, his voice breaking in all the right places. Why would I burn down my own house? Everything I owned was in there. Everything we built together. Inspector Webb sat across from him, unmoved by the performance. He laid out the evidence with methodical care: the accelerant traces, the timeline, the insurance policy. Witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Benjamin making multiple trips to the garage that evening. You were laid off 3 months ago, Mr. Causey, Webb said. You've been living off your wife's income. Your credit cards are maxed out. You needed money, and you saw an opportunity. I didn't do this. Benjamin's hands clenched into fists on the table. I love my wife. I would never put her in danger. She could have died in that fire. Abigail's jaw tightened. The way he said it, not I almost killed her, but she could have died, as if her potential death was an unfortunate possibility rather than the inevitable result of setting a house on fire while she was inside. Webb pressed harder, but Benjamin held his ground. Without hard evidence tying him directly to the purchase of the accelerant, they couldn't hold him. He was released 4 hours later, still under suspicion but legally free. The rental apartment was small and depressing, a far cry from their 5-bedroom colonial. They lived off Abigail's salary, the job she'd worked so hard to excel at, the promotion Benjamin had pretended to celebrate. He played the devoted husband with increasing desperation, cooking dinners, rubbing her shoulders, talking about their future once the insurance came through. But Abigail could see his frustration growing. The insurance company was stalling, unwilling to pay out until the arson investigation concluded. Every day without money was another day Benjamin's plan fell apart. Every evening, while Benjamin watched television or scrolled through his phone, Abigail sat at the small dining table with her laptop, examining the financial records she'd saved. At first, she was looking for anything that might help the investigation against Benjamin. What she found was so much worse. Transfers to offshore accounts. She found the first one dated 8 months back. Then another, and another. Over $80,000 stolen from their joint accounts in careful increments. Small enough that she wouldn't notice the individual transactions, but large enough to add up to a fortune. Credit cards opened in her name. She found the statements buried in old email folders, cards she'd never applied for, balances she'd never authorized. All maxed out and making minimum payments from accounts she didn't know existed. Loans against her inheritance. Her grandmother's money, the nest egg that was supposed to be untouchable, leveraged and borrowed against. Benjamin's signature forged next to hers on documents she'd never seen. Her hands trembled as she clicked through folder after folder, each one revealing another layer of theft, another betrayal. This wasn't opportunistic. This was systematic. Benjamin had been looting their life together for months, carefully and deliberately. Then she found the emails. The folder was labeled MR, innocuous enough that Abigail almost skipped it. But something made her click. And there, in thread after thread, was Benjamin's affair laid bare. Melissa, 28 years old, a bartender at the upscale restaurant where Benjamin claimed he'd been networking. The emails started casual flirtation, compliments, the usual dance of infidelity. But they escalated quickly into something darker. Once the insurance comes through, we can start over. Costa Rica, like we talked about. Just you and me. What about Abigail? Don't worry about her. I'm handling the wife situation. Abigail's stomach turned. She scrolled further, finding more explicit planning. Bank accounts in Costa Rica. Plane tickets for 2. Property listings for beachfront homes. And then, in an email dated 2 weeks before the fire, after the fire, I'll play the grieving husband for a few months. Then I'll tell everyone I need a fresh start. We'll be together by spring, baby. Just need to get rid of the wife first. Get rid of the wife, not divorce. Not separate. Get rid of. Abigail sat back, the laptop screen blurring in front of her. This wasn't just insurance fraud. Benjamin hadn't just been planning to steal from her and disappear. He'd been planning to frame her for the arson, or worse, ensure she didn't survive to contest anything. The fire that she'd escaped wasn't a crime of desperation. It was attempted murder. She looked toward the living room where Benjamin sat watching a game show, laughing at something the host said. So casual, so normal, as if he hadn't tried to kill her, as if he wasn't already spending the insurance money in his head, already planning his new life with his young mistress in paradise. Abigail made copies of everything, every email, every bank statement, every forged document. Her hands shook as she worked, but not with fear. This trembling was something else entirely. Something cold and focused and absolutely certain. Benjamin had tried to reduce her to ashes. He'd stolen her money, betrayed her trust, and attempted to murder her for an insurance payout. He'd underestimated her completely, assumed she was too trusting, too naive, too easy to destroy. He was wrong. This wasn't just insurance fraud. Benjamin had been planning to frame her, or worse, eliminate her entirely. Abigail saved the final file and closed her laptop, her jaw set with cold determination. If Benjamin wanted to play with fire, she would show him what it meant to burn. The lawyer's office was in a sleek downtown high-rise, the kind of place that whispered money and power. Abigail sat across from Margaret Torres, a woman in her late 40s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for destroying white-collar criminals. "Ms. Johnson," Margaret said after reviewing the documents Abigail had brought, "what you've uncovered here is extensive fraud, theft, and potentially attempted murder. What exactly are you looking for from me?" "Justice," Abigail said simply. "And I want to hire a private investigator. Someone ruthless. Someone who can find everything." Margaret smiled a sharp, predatory expression. "I know just the person." Diana Chen arrived at Abigail's office 2 days later. She was 36, compact and intense, with eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. Her reputation preceded her, former FBI and now private, with a 100% success rate on fraud cases. "Ms. Johnson," Diana said, shaking her hand. "Margaret tells me you need a deep dive on your husband. I need everything about Benjamin Causey," Abigail said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Every lie, every secret, every crime. I need proof that will stand up in court and destroy him completely." Diana flipped through the documents, the emails, the financial records, the offshore accounts. Her expression never changed, but Abigail saw her eyes sharpen. "This is good preliminary work," Diana said. "But if you want everything, it's going to take time. 3 months, maybe 4. Can you maintain your cover that long?" Abigail thought about sleeping next to Benjamin every night, pretending she didn't know he tried to murder her. Thought about smiling and nodding while he spun his lies. Thought about playing the supportive wife while gathering the rope to hang him with. "Yes," she said. "However long it takes." The first month, Diana documented the affair. She had photographs of Benjamin and Melissa at bars, slipping into hotels, having intimate dinners at restaurants across the city. The bartender was pretty in a generic way, long blonde hair, bright smile, the kind of woman who probably reminded Benjamin of his youth. The second month, Diana tracked the offshore accounts. Benjamin had been more sophisticated than Abigail expected. Shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, cryptocurrency transfers, layered transactions designed to obscure the money trail. But Diana unraveled it all, following every dollar Benjamin had stolen. Then, in the third month, Diana found something that changed everything. "You need to see this," Diana said, arriving at Abigail's office with a thick file. 10 years ago, before Benjamin met you, he owned a rental property in Ohio. It burned down under suspicious circumstances. Abigail's hand stilled on her coffee cup. "Arson. Investigated as arson, but never proven. The insurance company paid out $200,000. Benjamin collected and moved to a new state 6 months later." Diana laid out the documents, insurance claims, fire inspector reports, newspaper clippings. Same pattern. Recent policy increase, financial stress, accelerant traces that couldn't be definitively tied to him. He's done this before, Abigail whispered. He's done this before, Diana confirmed. Which means this isn't desperation. This is his method. Benjamin Causey is a serial arsonist who burns down properties when he needs money. Abigail sat back, the pieces clicking into place. Benjamin hadn't just tried to kill her for insurance money, he'd done this before and gotten away with it. She wasn't his first victim. She was just the first one who'd caught him. Working with Margaret, Abigail began to see the full scope of Benjamin's abuse. It wasn't just the theft and the arson. It was years of systematic control. He'd isolated her from her family, claiming they were toxic and jealous of their success. He'd discouraged friendships, making snide comments about her colleagues until Abigail stopped inviting them over. He'd controlled the financial narrative of their marriage, insisting he handle all the complicated money matters while dismissing her questions as nagging. He made me doubt myself, Abigail told Margaret during one session. Every business instinct I had, he told me I was wrong. Every time I wanted to invest in my career, he convinced me to invest in his schemes instead. To failed businesses, both funded with my money, and somehow he made me feel like I was the problem for not believing in him enough. Margaret took notes, her expression grim. Classic financial abuse. He undermined your confidence while stealing your assets. You supported him, and he resented you for it. He refused to let me see financial statements, Abigail continued, the memories flooding back now that she was allowing herself to acknowledge them. Said I didn't need to worry about the boring stuff, but he was stealing from me the whole time, taking out loans in my name, forging my signature. And I trusted him. You trusted your husband, Margaret corrected. That's not a weakness. That's what marriage is supposed to be. The strategy came together over long meetings in Margaret's office. Criminal charges: arson, fraud, theft, attempted murder. But that wasn't enough. Abigail wanted more. I want to take everything from him, she told Margaret. The way he tried to take everything from me. Civil suit, Margaret said immediately. Sue for the stolen money, emotional damages, the value of your destroyed possessions, future lost earnings due to trauma. We go after him on every front, criminal and civil. By the time we're done, Benjamin Causey won't have a dollar to his name. They planned the timing carefully. The rest needed to be public, humiliating, at a moment when Benjamin felt safe. Diana would gather every piece of evidence first. Then they'd strike all at once, overwhelming him with proof before he could spin another lie. The hardest part was living the double life. During the day, Abigail played the supportive wife. She cooked dinners, watched television beside Benjamin, discussed their future when the insurance money came through. She smiled when he touched her, nodded when he talked, acted like nothing was wrong. At night, after Benjamin fell asleep, she reviewed Diana's reports and Margaret's legal briefs. She documented everything: Benjamin's increasing paranoia about the insurance investigation, his worsening temper, the subtle threats that he probably didn't even realize he was making. If they try to deny our claim, heads are going to roll, Benjamin said one evening, his voice dark with anger. I'll make sure everyone pays for making this difficult. Abigail took a photo of the bruise on her arm later that night, the one from where he'd grabbed her too hard during his rant. She recorded their conversations on her phone. She saved every text message, every email, every moment of evidence. Benjamin's paranoia grew. He snapped at her over minor things, accused her of not being supportive enough, complained that she was spending too much time working when she should be focused on their insurance claim. One night, he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave fingerprints. You're my wife, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're supposed to be on my side. I am, Abigail said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear. Always. She photographed the bruises the next morning and sent them to Diana. 3 months after she'd hired Diana, Abigail sat in Margaret's office one final time. Diana was there too, and between them sat a folder 6 inches thick. This is everything, Diana said, tapping the folder. The affair, documented with photos and witness statements. The offshore accounts, traced and verified. The previous arson in Ohio, with fire inspector reports and insurance records. The systematic theft from your accounts. The emails planning to get rid of the wife. Financial abuse documented over 7 years. Recent physical abuse with photographic evidence. Margaret added her own stack of documents. Criminal complaint ready to file multiple counts of fraud, theft, arson, and attempted murder. Civil suit prepared for $2.3 million in damages. Restraining order ready to serve. We've coordinated with the district attorney's office. The moment you give the word, we move. Diana handed Abigail the final report, 6 inches thick of evidence, photographs, financial records, and witness statements. This is enough to bury him, Diana said. Abigail looked at the folder that represented her husband's complete destruction. Every crime documented. Every lie exposed. Every secret brought into the light. 3 months of playing victim while building the case that would take everything from him. She thought about the woman she'd been 7 years ago. Falling in love with a man who'd seemed confident and capable. The woman who'd supported and trusted and believed. The woman Benjamin had systematically undermined, stolen from, and finally tried to murder. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone harder, colder, and absolutely certain. Good, Abigail replied, her voice steady as steel. Because that's exactly what I intend to do. Have you ever had that moment when everything you believed suddenly shattered? When you realized someone you trusted had been lying all along? What did you do next? Drop a comment below. Your story might help someone else facing the same crossroads. Abigail filed the paperwork on a Tuesday morning, 3 months to the day after the fire. Margaret stood beside her at the courthouse, both women carrying boxes of evidence that represented Benjamin's complete destruction. This isn't a simple divorce, Margaret told the clerk. We're filing criminal charges simultaneously: fraud, theft, attempted murder, and conspiracy. We have a motion to freeze all of the defendant's accounts and a request for an immediate arrest warrant. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed the stack of documents. Abigail had timed it perfectly. While the clerk was stamping papers, Margaret's team was already executing the account freezes. By the time Benjamin learned what was happening, every dollar he'd stolen would be locked down tight. The district attorney had reviewed the evidence the week before. Ms. Johnson, he'd said, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've ever seen. We're charging him with everything. Now, standing in the courthouse with the filed paperwork in her hands, Abigail felt a cold satisfaction settle over her. 3 months of pretending. 3 months of sleeping next to a man who tried to kill her. 3 months of playing victim while building his cage. It was over. The trap was sprung. The warrant will be executed this afternoon, Margaret said as they walked to the car. Are you sure you want to be there? I'm sure, Abigail replied. I want to see his face. Benjamin had finally landed a new construction job 2 weeks ago, project manager for a commercial development downtown. He'd been so proud, talking about his comeback and how he was getting back on track. Abigail had smiled and congratulated him. All while knowing his comeback would last exactly 14 days. She sat in her car across the street from the construction site at 2 p.m., watching workers move between partially built structures. Diana sat beside her, binoculars in hand. Police are in position, Diana said. And your other guest has arrived. Abigail looked where Diana pointed. Melissa stood near the side entrance, lunch bag in hand, clearly there to surprise Benjamin with a romantic gesture. She looked young and eager, probably imagining their future in Costa Rica, probably thinking about the insurance money that would fund their escape. She had no idea what was about to happen. 2 unmarked police cars pulled up to the side entrance. 4 officers emerged, badges out, purpose clear. Workers stopped what they were doing, curious and concerned. Benjamin appeared from a trailer, still wearing his hard hat, confusion crossing his face. Then recognition. Then fear. Abigail watched as the officers approached Benjamin, watched them speak, watched Benjamin's face drain of color. She saw him shake his head, saw his mouth form denials, saw him look around as if searching for escape. There was none. The handcuffs went on in front of God and everyone, his new boss, his co-workers, the construction crew he'd been managing. Men he'd been working alongside for 2 weeks watched as Benjamin Causey was arrested for arson, fraud, theft, and attempted murder. But the best moment was when Benjamin's eyes landed on Melissa. She stood frozen at the entrance, lunch bag still in hand, her face a mask of shock. Benjamin's expression shifted from fear to pleading, silently begging her to do something, say something, help him. Melissa dropped the lunch bag and ran. By that evening, Melissa had tried calling Benjamin 17 times. Each call went to voicemail because Benjamin was in custody, being processed and photographed and fingerprinted. Each voicemail grew more panicked. Diana's team intercepted the calls as evidence. They also served Melissa with a subpoena at her apartment that night. Ms. Rivera, the process server, said, "You're required to testify in the case against Benjamin Causey. You've been documented as having knowledge of multiple crimes, including conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. You can cooperate, or you can be charged as an accessory." Melissa's Costa Rica dreams evaporated in that moment. Her future with Benjamin, the beachfront property, the fresh start, the stolen insurance money, all of it disappeared like smoke. She would testify, or she would go to prison alongside him. She chose to testify. In the holding cell at the county jail, Benjamin finally understood the scope of what was happening. The public defender assigned to his case had arrived with a folder full of evidence Benjamin had thought destroyed in the fire he'd set. Financial records going back 7 years. Emails with Melissa planning their escape and discussing getting rid of the wife. Bank statements showing offshore transfers. Documentation of his previous insurance fraud in Ohio. "How?" Benjamin asked, his voice hollow. "The records were in the house. Everything burned. Your wife saved them," the public defender said. "Before the fire started, she removed her laptop and all financial documents. She saw you preparing the arson, Mr. Causey. She saw everything, and instead of confronting you, she built a case." Benjamin's hands trembled. Abigail, quiet, trusting Abigail who'd never questioned his explanations, who'd funded his businesses, who'd made herself small so he could feel big. She'd known. She'd seen him pour the accelerant, and instead of stopping him, she'd let him commit the crime while saving the evidence to destroy him. "The prosecution has everything," the public defender continued. Testimony from the fire inspector, witness statements from neighbors, financial experts ready to explain the theft. Your mistress is cooperating in exchange for immunity, and they found your previous arson conviction in Ohio. Same pattern, same method. This establishes premeditation. It wasn't murder, Benjamin said weakly. I didn't mean to. Abigail wasn't supposed to be hurt. You set fire to a house while your wife was inside. That's attempted murder in any court. The public defender closed the folder. The DA is offering a plea deal. 20 years, eligible for parole in 15. I suggest you take it. No, Benjamin said. I'll fight this. It's her word against mine. It's not her word. It's 6 inches of documented evidence against your denials. But if you want a trial, that's your right. The public defender stood. Fair warning, the media already has the story. Architect exposes husband's murder plot. Your face is on the evening news. Fighting this publicly will only make it worse. The media firestorm was immediate and brutal. By the next morning, every news outlet in the state had picked up the story. Benjamin's face stared out from television screens and newspaper front pages. Local man arrested for attempted murder of wife through arson. Construction manager charged in insurance fraud scheme. Benjamin's lawyer, criminal defense attorney he'd hired with money he no longer had access to, tried to negotiate a plea deal. Margaret Torres refused. My client wants a trial, Margaret told reporters on the courthouse steps. Ms. Johnson has nothing to hide. She wants the full scope of her husband's crimes exposed to the public. Benjamin's family called after seeing the evidence. His mother wept on the phone, apologizing to Abigail for raising a monster. His brother refused to speak to him. His sister wrote him a letter saying she'd always known he was capable of something terrible. Everyone who'd ever known Benjamin Causey now knew what he was: an arsonist, a thief, an attempted murderer. His reputation, carefully constructed over decades, crumbled in days. In his cell, Benjamin finally understood what he'd done. Not the crimes he'd always known what he was doing. No, he understood his fundamental miscalculation. He'd looked at Abigail and seen a doormat, a woman too trusting to question him, too loving to suspect him, too easy to manipulate and eventually erase. He dismissed her intelligence, underestimated her strength, and ignored the possibility that she might fight back. That miscalculation, that arrogant certainty that Abigail Johnson was too weak to stop him had been his downfall. She'd seen him preparing to commit arson and murder, and instead of panicking or confronting or running, she'd saved evidence, built a case, and documented every crime he'd committed for years. She'd played victim for 3 months while systematically constructing his cage. Benjamin sat in his cell, finally understanding what he'd unleashed. The woman he'd dismissed as a doormat, the wife he'd planned to erase, had systematically documented his every crime. He'd underestimated Abigail Johnson, and that miscalculation was going to cost him everything. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows, cameras ready for the moments when photography was permitted. Abigail's colleagues from the architecture firm sat in support. Curious onlookers who'd followed the case lined the gallery. Every seat was taken, every eye focused forward. Benjamin sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit. His lawyer, a silver-haired man named Robert Hutchins, leaning close to whisper instructions. Hutchins had a reputation for defending wealthy men accused of crimes against their wives. His strategy was always the same, and Abigail knew exactly what was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hutchins began in his opening statement, his voice smooth and practiced. "This case is about a woman scorned. Hell hath no fury, as they say, like a woman scorned. My client made mistakes. He had an affair, yes. He made poor financial decisions, but attempted murder, arson. These charges are the invention of a vindictive wife seeking revenge for infidelity." Abigail sat in the front row, professionally dressed in a navy suit, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She didn't react to Hutchins' words, didn't flinch, didn't show anger or hurt or anything that might feed his narrative. She simply sat, composed and controlled, while he tried to paint her as an irrational woman driven by jealousy. Margaret Torres stood for the prosecution's opening. "The evidence will show that Benjamin Causey is a serial criminal who has been systematically abusing, stealing from, and ultimately attempting to murder his wife for financial gain. This isn't about a scorned woman. This is about a calculated predator who made one critical mistake. He underestimated his victim." Inspector Marcus Webb took the stand first, his testimony methodical and damning. He explained the 3 locations where accelerant was found, the deliberate pattern of the fire, the timeline that placed Benjamin alone in the garage before the blaze started. "In my 23 years as a fire inspector," Webb said, "this was one of the most clear-cut cases of arson I've investigated. The accelerant was poured in deliberate paths designed to spread the fire quickly and completely. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted total destruction." Hutchins cross-examined, trying to suggest the accelerant could have been from legitimate sources: stored gasoline, cleaning supplies. Webb shut down each theory with technical precision. Financial experts followed, detailing the systematic theft. Charts and graphs displayed on screens showed transfers to offshore accounts: $82,347 over 8 months. Credit cards opened in Abigail's name, maxed out and hidden. Loans against her inheritance, forged signatures, shell corporations. This wasn't opportunistic theft, the forensic accountant testified. This was sophisticated financial fraud executed over an extended period with clear intent to hide assets from the victim. Then came the revelation that made the courtroom gasp. Benjamin's previous insurance fraud conviction in Ohio, a rental property burned 10 years ago. $200,000 collected, suspiciously similar circumstances. The prosecutor laid out the pattern: financial stress, insurance policy increase, convenient fire payout. "Benjamin Causey has done this before," the prosecutor told the jury. "This is his method. This is who he is." Melissa took the stand on day 3, visibly uncomfortable in a conservative dress that looked borrowed. She'd been granted immunity in exchange for testimony, but her reluctance was obvious. "Yes, we were having an affair," Melissa admitted, her voice small. "For about a year." "And did you discuss the future with Mr. Causey?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes. He said once the insurance money came through, we could start over. In Costa Rica. He'd already looked at properties there." "Did Mr. Causey discuss his wife with you?" Melissa's eyes darted to Benjamin, then away. "He said she was the problem, that she held him back, that he needed to handle the wife situation before we could be together." "Handle the wife situation," the prosecutor repeated. "Did you understand what that meant?" "I thought he meant divorce," Melissa said weakly. "Did you discuss how you would split the insurance money?" "Yes, 50-50. He said it would be enough for both of us to start over." Hutchins's cross-examination tried to paint Melissa as a gold digger who'd manipulated Benjamin, but the damage was done. The jury had heard about Costa Rica, about splitting insurance money, about handling Abigail. Whether Melissa was credible or not, her testimony corroborated the documentary evidence. On day 4, Abigail took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as she was sworn in. She wore a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back. No jewelry except her wedding ring she'd kept it on deliberately. A reminder of vows Benjamin had shattered. "Ms. Johnson," Margaret began, "please tell the jury about your marriage to Benjamin Causey." Abigail spoke clearly, her voice steady. "I met Benjamin 7 years ago. He was confident, charming, had big plans for his construction business. I was building my career as an architect, and I thought we'd build a life together. How did the financial dynamics of your marriage work?" "Benjamin controlled everything. All the accounts, all the decisions. He said I shouldn't worry about the boring stuff, that he'd handle it. When I tried to be involved, he made me feel stupid. He'd talk over me, dismiss my concerns, tell me I didn't understand business even though I was successfully running projects worth millions at my firm." "Did you support Mr. Causey financially?" "Yes. I funded 2 of his businesses with my inheritance money. Both failed. He blamed market conditions, bad timing, everything except his own decisions. Then he'd convince me to try again, to believe in him again." Abigail's voice didn't waver, but emotion flickered in her eyes. "He isolated me from my family, said they were jealous of our success. I stopped seeing friends because Benjamin always had something critical to say about them. I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to make him feel bigger." Margaret nodded, then brought up the emails on the courtroom screens. "Can you read this message from your husband to Melissa Rivera?" Abigail read, her voice never wavering. "After the fire, I'll play the grieving husband for a few months. Then I'll tell everyone I need a fresh start. We'll be together by spring, baby. Just need to get rid of the wife first." Several jurors visibly recoiled. One woman in the back row wiped her eyes. "Get rid of the wife," Margaret repeated. "What did you think when you read that?" "That my husband had tried to kill me," Abigail said simply. "That the fire wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me completely." She described seeing Benjamin through the garage window, watching him pour accelerant with cold calculation. Described her decision to save evidence rather than confront him. Described being in the shower when the fire started, trapped, vulnerable. Exactly where Benjamin had planned for her to be. "If you hadn't forgotten your phone," Margaret said. "If you hadn't gone back downstairs and seen him preparing the arson, what would have happened?" "I would have died in that fire," Abigail said. "And Benjamin would have collected the insurance money and lived happily ever after with his mistress." The jury was visibly moved. Several jurors had tears in their eyes. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Hutchins's cross-examination was aggressive, but Abigail was unshakable. He suggested she'd fabricated evidence out of revenge. She calmly produced the metadata on all files, showing they were created before the fire. He suggested she'd misinterpreted Benjamin's actions. She produced photographs, bank records, witness statements. Her meticulous documentation destroyed every theory he proposed. "Isn't it true, Ms. Johnson, that you were angry about your husband's affair?" "I was angry about many things," Abigail replied evenly. "The affair, the theft, the lies, the attempted murder. But this isn't about revenge. It's about justice." Hutchins had no answer for the Ohio arson. No answer for the offshore accounts. No answer for the males planning to get rid of the wife. His cross-examination fell apart under the weight of evidence. Against his lawyer's advice, Benjamin took the stand. It was a disaster from the first question. "Mr. Causey, did you set fire to your home?" the prosecutor asked. "My wife drove me to it," Benjamin said, his tone defensive and arrogant. "She was always working, always focused on her career. She made me feel like a failure. So you committed arson because your wife was successful." "That's not what I said. You're twisting my words." But Benjamin kept talking, kept blaming Abigail for his choices. He admitted to the affair, justified it by saying Melissa understood him in ways Abigail didn't. He claimed the offshore accounts were backup plans for their future. He insisted he'd never intended to hurt Abigail, even though he'd set fire to their house while she was inside. Under cross-examination, Benjamin contradicted himself repeatedly. First he denied being in the garage, then admitted it but claimed he was organizing boxes. First he said he didn't know about accelerant, then tried to explain it away as stored gasoline. His temper flared when the prosecutor pressed him about the Ohio arson. "That was different," Benjamin shouted. I was younger. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" the prosecutor said calmly. "Is that what you call insurance fraud? Is attempted murder a mistake too?" Benjamin's face flushed red. "My wife is a vindictive." "That's enough, Mr. Causey," the judge interjected, but it was too late. The jury had seen Benjamin's true character: arrogant, defensive, blaming everyone but himself. The man who tried to appear sympathetic had revealed himself as exactly what Abigail had described: a manipulative abuser who'd tried to murder his wife for money. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 47 minutes. When they returned, the courtroom held its collective breath. The forewoman stood, verdict sheet in hand. "On the count of arson in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the count of attempted murder?" "Guilty." "On the counts of fraud and theft?" "Guilty on all counts." Benjamin's face went white. His hands gripped the table as if the room were spinning. Hutchins put a hand on his shoulder, but Benjamin barely seemed to notice. Abigail sat in the front row, watching her husband's world collapse. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction in his pain, just a quiet sense of completion, like a building finally finished after years of careful construction. "Justice," she thought, "sometimes takes time, but it always comes. Justice doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes the real victory isn't just winning, it's reclaiming who you are in the process." What does justice mean to you? Have you ever had to fight for accountability when everyone told you to just move on? Share your thoughts below. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison adjusted her reading glasses, her expression carved from granite. Benjamin stood before her, his shoulders hunched in a cheap suit so different from the confident man who'd once commanded attention at dinner parties. "Mr. Porter," the judge began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you have been convicted of attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and domestic violence. These were not crimes of passion or momentary weakness. They were calculated, cruel, and premeditated." Abigail sat in the gallery, Diana's hand wrapped around hers. She didn't flinch as the judge continued. "The evidence shows a pattern of deception stretching back years. The insurance fraud involving your supposed stolen equipment. The systematic theft from your wife's inheritance. The carefully planned fire that could have killed her." Judge Harrison paused, letting the words settle. "You betrayed the trust of your wife and endangered her life for financial gain. I sentence you to 15 years in the state penitentiary." The bailiff moved forward with handcuffs. Benjamin's head snapped toward Abigail one last time, his mouth opening as if to speak. But whatever he wanted to say died on his lips when he saw her face calm and moved, already looking past him. The cuffs clicked shut, and he was led away, disappearing through the side door like smoke. Diana squeezed Abigail's hand. "One down," she whispered. The civil courtroom had a different energy, cooler, more businesslike. Abigail's attorney, Margaret Chen, was a woman who smiled rarely and devastated opposing counsel with surgical precision. The defendant stole approximately $847,000 from Mrs. Porter over the course of their marriage, Margaret stated, pacing before the jury. Money left to her by her parents. Money she trusted him to manage. Money he systematically drained while making her believe she was financially dependent on him. Expert witnesses testified about financial abuse, its psychological impact, how it trapped victims and destroyed their sense of self-worth. A forensic accountant walked the jury through Benjamin's web of accounts, each transfer another thread of betrayal. And then, Margaret continued, when she began to suspect, when she started asking questions, he tried to kill her, burn their house around her. The emotional damages alone are incalculable. Benjamin's court-appointed attorney could barely mount a defense. His assets were frozen, his accounts seized. He sat at the defendant's table looking hollowed out, a shell of a man. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. In the matter of Porter versus Porter, the judge announced, "We find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is hereby ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution and damages." Margaret leaned toward Abigail. "Since he has no accessible assets, we've secured a garnishment order. Every penny he earns prison wages, any future income goes to you first. For the rest of his life." Abigail nodded slowly. 15 years of prison wages wouldn't touch the debt, and by the time Benjamin got out, he'd be an old man starting from nothing. Everything he earned would flow directly to her until the day he died. Financial servitude. A life sentence of his own. Melissa vanished the day of Benjamin's sentencing. Diana discovered it while tracking down Benjamin's remaining assets. That hidden account, she said over coffee, her tablet screen glowing between them. The one with 50 grand. Melissa cleaned it out yesterday. Every cent. Abigail stared at her latte. He must be devastated. She never loved him. Diana's voice held no sympathy. She wanted money. When that dried up, so did her affection. Benjamin had lost everything: his freedom, his fortune, his mistress, his future. Abigail felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just a distant, detached acknowledgement that justice sometimes worked. The insurance settlement came through 3 weeks later. With Benjamin's conviction for arson, the company had no choice but to pay the full policy amount. The check arrived via courier. $500,000. Benjamin, as a convicted arsonist, was legally barred from benefiting. Every penny went to Abigail. One letter arrived from prison, forwarded by Margaret with a note, your choice whether to read. Abigail opened it at her kitchen table, Diana's kitchen table now, since she was still living with her friend. Benjamin's handwriting sprawled across the page, messier than she remembered. Abby, I need you to understand. I was going to include you in the plans eventually. I was going to. She stopped reading. The rest didn't matter: excuses, justifications, claims of love he clearly didn't understand. She carried the letter to the sink, held a corner to the gas stove flame, and watched it curl and blacken. She didn't need his apologies, didn't need his explanations, didn't need anything from him ever again. Abigail stood in her attorney's office 1 month later, holding the insurance check for $500,000, money Benjamin had burned their house to steal, returned to her by his conviction. What will you do now? Margaret asked, professional curiosity softening her usual crisp demeanor. Abigail looked at the check, then out the window at the city stretching below. Somewhere out there was a life she hadn't imagined 6 months ago, one built on truth instead of lies, strength instead of dependence, her own choices instead of someone else's manipulations. She smiled, and it felt real. Build something better, she said. From the ashes. 5 years later, Abigail stood before her new home as the morning sun broke over the hills. The house rose from the landscape like a sculpture, all clean lines and soaring glass, a testament to vision realized without compromise. She'd designed every angle herself, built it on land purchased with the settlement money Benjamin had tried to steal, literally and metaphorically. She had built from ashes. The house wasn't just beautiful. It was a declaration. I survived. I thrived. I won. Her architecture firm had exploded in those 5 years. From 20 employees to over 100. She was now the most sought-after architect in the region, featured in Architectural Digest and Design Excellence. Her buildings won awards, structures that seemed to defy gravity and expectation. She'd developed a specialty, Phoenix Designs, buildings that rose from difficult sites, burned lots, condemned properties, places everyone else had given up on. Abigail would arrive with her blueprints and show them what transformation looked like. Clients didn't just hire her for her technical skill. They hired her because she understood resurrection. The Phoenix Rising Foundation occupied a renovated brownstone downtown. Abigail had used the insurance money, that $500,000. Benjamin had burned the house to claim to launch it 3 years ago. The foundation helped women escape financial abuse, resources, legal aid, financial counseling, emergency grants for women who needed to leave but had no money because their partners controlled everything. Abigail had lived that nightmare. Now she made sure other women had an exit route. Dozens of women cycled through their programs annually. Some went on to rebuild their lives. Others struggled but kept fighting. All of them found something at Phoenix Rising they'd lost: belief that they deserved better. Abigail spoke at events nationwide, sharing her story, teaching women to recognize the signs she'd missed: the gaslight, the isolation, the financial manipulation disguised as protection. If someone tells you you're bad with money enough times, she told audiences, you start believing it, even when they're the ones stealing from you. Every speech ended with a standing ovation. The book had been Margaret Chen's idea. You need to write this down, her attorney had said. Other women need to hear it. Building on Ashes, one woman's journey from victim to victor hit the New York Times bestseller list 6 weeks after publication. The speaking engagements multiplied. Television interviews. A documentary crew following her for a feature on survivors of domestic violence. Abigail used every platform to advocate for financial literacy education, for laws protecting victims of economic abuse, for systemic change that would prevent other women from falling into the trap she'd barely escaped. The book's dedication was simple. For every woman who was told she couldn't, you can. The personal transformation ran deeper than professional success. Abigail had reconnected with her family, cousins, and friends Benjamin had systematically isolated her from, convincing her they didn't understand their relationship, that they were jealous of what he provided. She traveled now. Bali, Barcelona, Buenos Aires, places she'd dreamed of seeing while trapped in a marriage that never left town because Benjamin controlled the finances. There was someone new in her life too. Marcus, a contractor she'd met through a project. He respected her work, her boundaries, her independence. They built things together, sometimes literally, and when she needed space, he gave it without resentment. Her wealth and success were built by her own hands. Every dollar earned through her talent, her vision, her relentless work. No one could take credit for it. No one could claim they'd made her. She'd made herself. Benjamin remained in prison. 10 years left on his sentence. He worked in the prison laundry, earning 75 cents an hour. Every penny was garnished and sent to Abigail per the court order. He'd continue paying after release. A lifetime of financial servitude to the woman he tried to destroy. Diana still tracked these details, updating Abigail quarterly like a particularly satisfying stock report. His family didn't visit anymore. His reputation had been annihilated by the trial coverage. Even among inmates where moral relativism usually reigned, he was a pariah. Everyone knew his story. The man who tried to murder his wife for insurance money. Prison had a particular contempt for men who hurt women. Melissa had vanished completely. Diana's investigator tracked her to Miami, then lost the trail. Probably living under an assumed name. The $50,000 she'd stolen from Benjamin dwindling slowly. Money always ran out eventually. Karma found everyone. Abigail rarely thought about her. Melissa was just another person who'd revealed their character through Benjamin's destruction. Nothing more. The foundation's annual fundraiser filled the downtown ballroom with 500 guests. Abigail took the stage and addressed the color of flame's deliberate symbolism she no longer shied away from. 5 years ago, she began, I stood across the street watching my house burn. My husband had set the fire to fake my death and collect insurance money. I had nothing, no money, no home, no idea how I'd survive. She clicked to the first slide, her new home. Magnificent against the sunset, the fire that was supposed to destroy me forged me into something stronger. The applause started before she finished. She showed photos of her firm's projects, talked about the women Phoenix Rising had helped, shared letters from survivors who'd rebuilt their lives. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Late that night, Abigail sat alone in her home study. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the valley. On her desk, in a simple frame, was a photograph, their old house engulfed in flames, taken by a neighbor that terrible night. She kept it as a reminder of who she'd been, of who she'd become. There was no bitterness when she looked at it now, only peace. The woman who'd doubted herself, who'd believed Benjamin's lies about her incompetence, who'd thought she needed his guidance to survive, that woman was gone. In her place stood the architect of her own destiny. Success wasn't just the money or Benjamin's imprisonment. It was reclaiming her voice, her power, her life. Building something meaningful from tragedy. Helping others do the same. Living authentically, unapologetically. That was true freedom. Abigail Johnson stood on the balcony of the home she'd designed, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, colors of fire, yes, but also colors of warmth and new beginnings. Benjamin had tried to reduce her life to ashes. Instead, she had risen from those ashes, transformed. She was no longer the woman who had stood across the street watching her house burn, frightened and uncertain. She was the woman who had taken that fire and used it to forge something unbreakable. Benjamin Causey had burned their house down for insurance money, but Abigail Johnson had exposed him and taken everything, not just his money or freedom, but his power over her. And in doing so, she had found something far more valuable than any insurance payout, herself. The phoenix, she thought, doesn't just survive the fire. It becomes the fire, and she was burning brighter than ever. Abigail's story started with betrayal and fire, but it ended with transformation and power. We all face moments that could break us, but some of us use those moments to rebuild something even stronger. What's your Phoenix moment? What fire forged you into who you are today? Let's build a community of survivors in the comments. Your story matters. Thank you for listening and for being part of Dark Desire Studio. Until next time, remember, what was meant to destroy you can become the foundation for something extraordinary. Keep rising, keep building, keep burning bright.